Welcome everybody. I'm Paul May. I'm the chairman of this committee and I'm the vice chair of the Avon Fire Authority. I'm going to just go through apologies for absence. Emma, can I just ask you, can you list them out please?
Just Councillor Riddle.
Right.
I'm awaiting Councillor William.
Right, so thank you very much. So the next item is the emergency evacuation procedure. Please, Luke.
Yeah, good morning everybody. Two emergency exits from this room, one at the back of the room there just behind the camera and one to my left. There are stairwells right in front of us and there's also one at the other end of the building. There are no fire alarm tests planned for today, so if we do hear the fire alarm then we'll just evacuate as per what I've just said.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Any declarations? Nobody indicating, so none have been indicated. Public access. I think Councillor Moss, I can't see him, is on the Fire Authority and he's coming for this afternoon's meeting. So he's just sat there as an observer this morning. So welcome to Councillor Moss. Right. Welcome to the meeting. There's one or two new faces around the table. Shall we quickly go around and introduce ourselves? As I said, I'm Paul May. I'm a councillor for Bath and North East Somerset. And this is really nice to have a meeting in Keynsham. And a big welcome to everybody on coming here. So over to you, Luke. Councillors first. Oh, we'll do councillors first, right. David?
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward in the fine City and County of Bristol.
Councillor Yassin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill, Bristol City Council.
Councillor Kim Connolly, North Somerset Council.
Councillor Jane Stansfield, Thornbury Ward, South Gloucestershire.
Hi, Tim Kent, Bristol City Council.
Good morning, Councillor Onkertheni, Bath and North East Somerset.
And I'm David Powell, I'm the independent member of the committee.
Thank you. Can we do the officers then, Luke? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning everybody. Luke Gazzard, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery. That's Prevention, Protection and Response.
Good morning everybody, my name is Matt Cook, I'm the Chief Fire Officer at Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good morning everybody, Paula Lyons, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Portfolio.
And good morning, I'm Simon Flood, I'm the Performance and Information Manager for Avon Fire.
Good morning, Caroline Taylor, I'm the Head of Corporate Assurance and Continuous Improvement.
Morning, I'm Lorna Wynn-Yates, Corporate Risk Advisor.
Good morning, I'm Claire Pratt, Business Continuity and Resilience Manager.
Craig Sullivan, Audit Partner from Bishop Fleming, the External Auditors.
Good morning, Matthew Stacey, the Managing Consultant from RSM, the Internal Auditors.
Mark Jones, Partner with RSM, Internal Auditors, and I act as your Head of Internal Audit.
Rachel Stewart, and I am the Fleet Administration Manager.
I'm Matt Derrick, I'm Head of Transport and Technical Service at Fire and Rescue Service.
Morning, I'm Anne-Marie Hoskins, I'm a Central Stores Manager.
Morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Good morning, I'm Verity Trescott, Statutory Finance Officer.
And Shazia Dyer, Deputy Monitoring Officer for this meeting.
Thank you everybody. We had a pre-meeting before this meeting. And I want to thank councillors for coming along to that and for engaging effectively with both our internal and external auditors. So, and we're going to make that a regular arrangement in the future, and that will then be formally a part of the process of this committee. So thank you very much to our auditors and to the councillors for coming along a bit earlier for the meeting. Right, so then I'm going to then just go through, make sure about the evacuation we've dealt with, but can you make sure you turn off your telephones, please, in the normal way for a meeting, because I think it would be quite handy to do that. And then we're going to work on the basis, as in the past, that if we have to take a vote on a report, and there are a few reports which we've got to have a vote on, I'll work on the basis of asking if there's anybody abstaining, anybody voting against, and then making a decision that it's been approved. So we'll move on. Now, the other thing is, I understand that Amber is poorly at the moment and can't be with us.
Chair, was there an update in terms? Thank you.
You want to do that now, Matt? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, members. So I'm pleased to inform you that following our revisit by the HMIC, officers attended the Fire Performance and Oversight Committee on the 4th of this month, and as a result of that and our presentation around the 4 causes of concern, the revisit letter has been published, so that is in the public domain, so that can be viewed on the HMI website. We've also released the letter publicly. I'm pleased to say that the HMI has identified significant progress that we have made across the causes of concern that were identified in the inspection. In particular, the accelerated cause of concern for site-specific risk information has been closed, and again, the HMI identified the significant work that had gone on across Avon Fire and Rescue Service to ensure that we have the right information available for firefighters so that when they mobilise to an incident, they have the information about specific buildings to make sure we have public safety and firefighter safety at the forefront of our priorities. Also pleased to report that in terms of prevention cause of concern, all but one recommendation was closed, and that final recommendation we're going to be talking about today in terms of productivity around prevention. The letter and the HMI specifically mentioned the prevention team and the significant work that that team has done to make those improvements, with considerable effort and over a short space of time. So just really wanted to note the effort that's been done across the service from the SSRI team to close that cause of concern and the work that's been done by the prevention team. Now, we still have cause of concern for culture, and that we have a plan in place for that, but the HMI recognises that cultural change takes time in an organisation. And as we go forwards into our next inspection that we're anticipating will begin just before Christmas and into the new year, again, our focus will be on demonstrating the significant work that we've done around culture, and you'll see within the minutes today, within the agenda, that we've got an update on one of our areas, which is the culture work that's gone on within control. And again, positive impact has been having in that area, and we'll continue that across the whole service. So just wanted to celebrate the successes that have been made, but we're not complacent as a service. We recognise there is still continuous improvements to make, and we are committed as a service, as one team, to work together to make sure we deliver an outstanding fire and rescue service for the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? I'll just make a statement, and I think it's been really, really positive news, bearing in mind that we've had so many bad inspections, that we're making the progress. But I'm really pleased to hear you say, Matt, that your ambition is to be outstanding, because at the moment we'll be happy with good, but moving to outstanding, we've got to have that ambition as an organisation, and I think that's great credit to you and, of course, to everybody else who's working with you. So thank you, Matt. So we'll move on then, if we can. I'd like to just get the minutes. They're a very full set of minutes, and I'd like to move approval of the minutes unless anybody's got any queries, and I would seek a seconder, please. Thank you, David. So, have I got the minutes to sign? I'll sign those afterwards, don't worry. Okay, so then, the external audit, you're going to do a verbal update, and I think we did have a few notes that were given to us that you're going to cover on that. So, over to you, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, we're giving a verbal update here today, but you do have a handout that's been shared with you this morning just to give you an update in terms of the status of our work. So the plan is that we will be back at your audit committee on the 5th of December with our 2 reports, our audit completion report, which gives you the outcome of our audit, the financial statements, and our auditor's annual report, the AAR, which summarises our work on the VFM and also concludes on the work of the financial statements audit as well. So this summary paper that you have today outlines that we are substantially through the audit process itself, and we focused on the key significant risk areas we reported to you in our audit plan. The first being management override, and this is where management may manipulate the results either through judgments, estimates or journals, and that work is ongoing at the moment, but at the moment we've not identified any significant issues. The valuations of land and buildings, because valuations is a key judgment, that becomes a significant risk. The work is ongoing on there, but we've not identified any material issues, although we have identified one overstatement of about £500,000 as part of that process because the incorrect information was used in relation to the floor areas. And in relation to...
Was that up or down, the £500,000? Positive or negative?
It was an overstatement to your fixed assets, so it's coming down. And then in relation to the valuation of the net pension fund liability, we have to place reliance on the pension fund auditors, and we're waiting for them to come back to us with the outcome of their audit in relation to that. As I said, the work in the other areas is substantially there. We obviously have to update our work around value for money around the updated HMI CFRS report, and that will form part of the key basis of the value for money report because that was identified as a significant weakness in the planning. So we need to document that through to demonstrate that the progress has been made, as Matt mentioned earlier. The final area is just in relation to, in section 3, there's a couple, what we call management letter points, so they're control recommendations that we'll be including in our report. And there's also some conversation with management around some potential provisions that may go into the draft financial statements that have already been published, but that's at an early stage at the moment. We're working that through with management. So a brief update from us, but just to let you know, everything's on track. There's nothing significant coming out from the audit of the financial statements, and we'll be back again in December with our final reports.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any queries, questions? Right, so thank you very much. You're welcome to go if you want to, or stay for the meeting. It'd be much appreciated. Thank you, Craig. Right, so the next item I got on the agenda is the performance report, which is item 8 on our agenda, and it's, if I can just find which pages, it's pages 27 to 34 in the document that's been given. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning again, councillors and colleagues. So what we're looking at today is a report on performance of Avon Fire and Rescue Service against our corporate metrics, so the things that we've agreed that we're going to measure that tell us whether the organisation or the service is performing effectively, and the data is covering the first 3 months of the current financial year, so it's April to the end of June. As usual, it's supported by Appendix 1, which I believe is on page 31 of your bundle, and that lists all 41 of our current corporate metrics, and those are organised under our 6 key objectives, under prevention, protection, response, resilience, improving the service and investing in our staff. And also on Appendix 2, which I think is on page 33 of your bundle, is a subset of those same indicators, which is designed for display at for the public on our stations and for our staff. And we produce one of these at the service level, which is what's included in the paper, but also for each of our fire stations covering the wards that they cover. And those are sent out on a monthly basis to councillors for their information. And we circulate those for the display at the stations. So we use a very simple red, amber, green mechanism for indicating whether the metrics are on target. So red indicates it's off target, amber that it's near to target, green that it is on target. And if you look at the scorecard and the distribution of the colours, you'll see that the vast majority of the metrics are showing as green, which is indicating that they're on target. So it is good news for us, and it's indicating the performance on a whole is effective and is on target, which is indicating that we're being successful in creating a safer community and a stronger service, which are our key objectives. But at this meeting, what we really do is to highlight and look at the metrics which are off target, and there are 5 of those currently on the scorecard. There is about 2 of the deliberate fires under preventions, which is about deliberate primary fires and deliberate secondary fires. Just to explain that, a primary fire is usually a fire in a building or a vehicle whether it wasn't derelict prior to ignition. There are some other little rules regarding it, but that's generally the difference between a primary fire and a secondary fire. So a secondary fire is anything other than that. So we have those 2 off target, and also under prevention we have home fire safety visits, both the volume of them and the timeliness of completion, which is currently off target. And then the 5th one is under investing our staff, where our personal development reviews, our PDRs, was off target. So we're going to look at a little bit of detail about each of those. And the way we do this is that we ask the metric owner, so the officer is responsible for that metric, to give us a recommendation about whether they're happy to tolerate that risk or to treat it. So tolerating it basically means that they think actually there's nothing that we need to do different, that if we continue in doing what we were doing, we will get on target. Treating is where we're saying actually we think we need to do things differently to get us back onto target, and the paper is setting out what it is that we think we're going to do differently to get us on target. So for each of the 5 metrics that are off target currently, the metric owner has recommended treating the risk, and the paper basically sets out what it is we're planning to do to treat the risk to hopefully get us back onto target. Okay, so if we go through the 5 that we have and just explain a little about them. So the first 2 says about deliberate primary fires excluding vehicles. We measure vehicle fires separately because they're quite a different thing, and also about deliberate secondary fires. And so the area manager responses set out the treatments that we're planning to do, and those are in paragraphs 5.1 to 5.7. And basically what we're advocating doing is making better use of the available data to target interventions, so we have very good and timely data about the incidents that we attend in their emergencies. So we know exactly when they're happening, where they're happening, the property type that's involved, the ignition source, and all sorts of things like that, which our officers are very good at collating, and we make sure that we collate that in a timely manner. So we have targets for completion of the incident reports, both because it means that it increases the value to us as a service with having timely information, and also because particularly people who are victims of fire often need information about that fire to relay to their insurance companies, and often they need that quite quickly. So we make a big play upon making sure that our data is accurate and timely. And the second thing that the area manager for response has done is talking about increasing our partnership work. So with other stakeholders and partners to seek to increase the partnership work to hopefully get us back onto target and get some more control over the number of incidents that are occurring. So that is the 2 activities under fires that are off target. So that the next 2 are both about completion of home fire safety visits, and there was about both the volume of completion and the timeliness of completion. So for volume of completion, we had completed 1,247 against a target of 1,750, so it's about 71% of target have been completed. And we've also got a target to complete home fire safety visits within the required time frame. So for each visit, depending on the risk, we set out how long it is that we'll set ourselves to do that visit. And we're looking to try and do that on 85% of the occasions is to meet that target. And currently we're running at 75%. So we know on both of those there is work to be done. And as I say, the area manager for prevention response is recommending treating that risk. And there are 2 main things that we're looking to do. So one of which is we continue to recognise the need to increase the number of referrals we get from partner agencies for crews to go out and complete home fire safety visits. So that's the first thing we're looking to do. And we're also looking to make sure that we're freeing up the time and looking at the time that our fire crews are spending to make sure there are sufficient hours in the day made available for prevention work to complete the home fire safety visits. And those are the 2 main things that are being recommended to treat and mitigate the risk for those 2 metrics. The final one that I wanted to refer to that is off target, to say, is under investing our staff about completion of personal development reviews of PDRs. Very important for us, making sure that our staff, we complete a development review for them to help them develop, and so they're contributing as much as they can to us as a service in our key objectives. Our current methodology is that we look to complete personal development reviews for all of our staff in the April to June period. And we've set a target of doing that to make sure that 95% were completed in that period. Unfortunately, we fell short of that, and at the end of June, only 85.8% were completed in target. Again, the Organisational Development Manager has recommended treating the risk, and the paper sets out what we were looking to do to treat it. So 2 main things. Firstly, it was about extending for a further month completion of the personal development reviews, so we extended the target to the end of July. And secondly, it was about targeted communications to directors and managers for exactly which PDRs have not been completed. So it's something we've got very good information on one of our internal dashboards about exactly which PDRs have been completed, so we know exactly which teams are on target, which individuals haven't had their PDR completed, so it enables us to target those interventions in a very effective way, and that's a live dashboard that anyone can view at any time. So those were the main mitigations that we were looking to do, and I'm pleased to report that we have had some success with that, and as of this morning we're on 96.5 completion rate, so we have got ourselves back onto target. So in effect those mitigations have worked and the risk is dissipating away. So that was really all I wanted to say with regard to the performance paper. So if I could open it up for questions from members, and then Chair, if we could take the recommendations after. Thank you.
Very
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions about the language on the scorecard. We're using the term accident quite a lot. One of the things that I've learned from dealing with road traffic collisions is there's no such thing as an accident. There's always a reason why the thing happened. So I'm just interested in why we are using the term accident in this. Also, the phrase deliberate fires in vehicles. Nobody sets fire to their own vehicle while they're inside it. So why are we using that sort of phraseology, please?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's the accident thing is a national definition. So nationally, the Fire and Rescue Services, the sector from the government down, will use that terminology. I think what we're saying with that, and the officers make a decision when they attend the fire about whether they merely suspect that the person was set light to deliberately. So sometimes that can be tricky for our officers because we're not the police, so we don't have the power to interview under caution or anything like that. And it's a lower standard of proof than the police use from when they're deciding whether something was arson. But what we ask our officers to do is to document on our recording system why they merely suspected it was deliberate. So that could be all sorts of things, and sometimes it's quite a fine judgment between two. So really, accident is the inverse of deliberate. If we've got no reason to suspect that it was deliberate, then it's being classed as accidental. So take on board, so I recognise that the road traffic collision replaced road traffic accident, and I'll certainly feed that back through our groups up to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. We'll see what we can do about thinking about changing that.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor. Just to also clarify, under the HSE use the term accidents. So under the RIDDLE regulations, we use the terminology that's aligned to the Health and Safety Executive, but we can still look at whether we need to change it, but there is an alignment to legislative HSE guidance documents.
Thank you. So just to clarify, accidental is anything that's not arson?
Not anything where we haven't or any reason to merely suspect that it may be deliberate. So if there isn't that, then we'd say it's accidental. We have a very few fires. Apologies. where it's a building fire and due to the nature or the way the building has been left, our fire inspectors are not able to gain access. So basically we can't do any evidential searching. So there is very few occasions where we don't make such a decision.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon, for your presentation. I got a concern about the professional development, as you mentioned it, about a 10%. So what is the reason we are behind this professional development? And also, what's the timescales to achieve? And also, is this like monthly compliance training, the stuff they're doing?
Sorry, I'm not sure I...
Professional development here, you mentioned 85%. So that means we are...
So the completion of personal development reviews, yes, I say at the time, at the end of June, we were on 85%, so it meant about 100 of our staff hadn't had a personal development review. So, as I say, the mitigation was we extended for a further month about the completion of them, and we've got good targeting on the ones that hadn't been done, so we've made sure that those are now done, and we're up to 95%. There are a handful of staff, I think it's 26, where the personal development review still hasn't been completed, but I know that our head of organisational development has written individually to the managers of those teams, basically just challenging them to say, you need to get this done, please. So it is certainly work in hand, and we need to be at 100%.
Luke?
Yeah, Councillor, I just want to assure you that this is an area that we identified last year as an area of improvement for ourselves. In terms of the PDR process, it was an open-ended process, so it could happen at any point of the year, depending on when your last PDR was. It had to be within 12 months. At times, we really struggled to get the completion rate as high as we needed to, and we wanted to. So our continuous improvement programme, we delivered a PDR process with a new system. It's still being introduced, but we've got a new system, and we also have a PDR window now over a 3-month period, and I think the success we've had to reach 96% has been because we've got that 3-year focused window. Apologies, 3-month window.
Thank you, Luke.
Kieran?
Okay, well, Rowan, you'll be next. Yeah, so I was going to pick up the deliberate primaries for prevention. These ones are always quite challenging, right? Because other people's behaviour is about influence and it takes a long time. So my question is, if we're focusing more on partnerships, are we getting the engagement from those partners that we need to do this? If you take local authorities, right, as an example, are we seeing that they are removing combustible waste in a timely manner? Then the last question, I suppose, is it realistic that we are going to see this brought in to target? I think on the board, I'll quite happily have the answer as no. But I just need to know, right? Because I'm thinking if this is a pattern of behaviour, this is the hardest thing to shift, right? So it's useful to know where you genuinely do think we're ready to get that. Can I? Oh, sorry, can I once again
call in Luke? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll just go over that first point for you, Councillor. I think I can give an example of some really good focused targeted work that we've done around deliberate fires recently, and that was around the curbside van dwelling community on the Downs in Bristol. There was a deliberate fire there of somebody's home, caravan. I've worked at exec level with Bristol City Council, and the prevention team at all different levels have worked within the council as well as the police to carry out a really targeted approach. And over the course of the following 7 days after that incident, we visited 132 different types of van dwellers across the whole of the city, and now we're rolling that out across the rest of the unitary authorities as well, although the issue seems to be focused more on Bristol at this moment in time. So the stakeholder engagement is there at every level within the local authority at this moment in time, and the police.
The other thing I would just say about that, Councillor, is that though we're looking to control and mitigate, the numbers are quite small. So it's 104 incidents over the whole of the Avon area over a 3-month period. So though it's higher than we expected, it's still relatively low risk, I suggest.
I think it's also worth noting here that we've had a very hot, dry summer, and behaviours change because of that. And that, we should be more alive to that at a local level, and that's what we're trying to drive from my perspective, a more focused led prevention activity resource. but it's just adopting to people's behaviours, and sometimes that is uncontrollable.
Have we finished, Kieran? Yeah. Okay. Jane?
My question was related to what Kieran was asking, because it seems to me that, deliberate fire setting is almost intractable. You don't know who's going to do it or where. So what I was interested in is because, like say in Thornbury a couple of years ago, we had one individual setting fires. So there was a lot of fires, but it was one individual. So when you investigate these, are you finding that there's a general increase across society in setting fires, or does it come down to that thing of there's certain individuals that are creating hotspots and therefore the numbers are up?
Can I come to you statistically first? I mean, where the numbers are quite small, then circumstances like you described there do have a big impact upon them. So it's where we work quite closely with our police colleagues. So we report to them every fire that we consider to be deliberate, and we engage with the police on our neighbourhood partnership forums with the councils as well about targeting that way. But just say, unfortunately, we're not minority report mine police. So if somebody goes out and decides to set light to things, it can be difficult to then, because it does have quite a large impact upon the data.
I think it's also worth bringing into this answer as well the success we've had with our children and young people's team. We've got a fire setters intervention programme which has been really successful. That's targeted at children and young adults, but only up to a certain age of when you become an adult. They carry out interventions once we work with our partners and somebody's identified as got an interest in fire setting. They go out and carry out a number of interventions in the home or a different setting to educate and try to stop or limit that behaviour.
Onkar?
Thank you, Chair. Probably the repetitive question, but just want to re-clarify again. So on deliberate fires, so why have numbers spike so sharply, and how do we measure the impact of the targeted prevention strategies beyond activity counts like patrols and leaflets? And the second question about PDR completion. What are the root cause of non-compliance? Is this cultural resistance, workload pressure, or just simply poor mismanagement oversight?
I think there's a piece of work for us to do internally at a real local level, station-based level. I've been in this role for over a year now, and I get the feeling our crews are very response-focused, which is not a bad thing. But actually, a huge part of their role is to be prevention-focused and stop the incidents happening in the first place. And they've got a really big role to play at a local level with local partners, local community groups. And we're just, in August, we started a trial of collecting some data across Yate Fire Station. It's been rolled out to one other station. A couple of weeks ago, that was rolled out to every single watch in the service, and that is a piece of work around their productivity. So they need to input on a daily basis every task they carry out. That is going to give some really useful data in around about end of October, although we'll carry it on for the foreseeable future as well. And it really allows us to understand their capacity and their productivity. And we will eventually get to the point in the next few months where we will be able to identify every station will have a different level of prevention activity they need to carry out, but it'll be balanced amongst the demand they have in terms of incidents and the demand they have on training as well. And once we've got that data, we'll be able to have a really focused approach on what activity they carry out.
Thanks, Chair. I had two questions. First was around the secondary deliberate fires. So I know the line about liaison with local authorities to arrange the timely removal of combustible waste or fly tipping, which is a great line, but with Bristol City Council, which is 40% of the area, we have no arrangements for removal of fly tipping from housing land, no targets. So what we find is that although we can remove fly tipping mostly from streets and parks within 3 working days, no target is set with our contractor for removing from housing land. Obviously that is higher density in social housing areas. So any fly tipping on that land is often left for weeks, months, even years, because our contractor puts it at the bottom of the pile to do. In fact, quite often refuses to remove the fly tipping, designating the land as not being Bristol City Council land, which clearly it is. And as a councillor, I know I spend many weeks sometimes getting stuff removed from housing land because of the total failure of the systems within Bristol City Council and our contractor Bristol Waste. I do not know if any of this increase in secondary deliberate fires is in Bristol or on housing land, but that might be interesting to look at, because I think this is a real failure at Bristol City Council's level in dealing with fly tipping, because there's a substantial amount of land, and quite a few parks are also considered housing land as well, which doesn't help this situation. So my concern is that you may hear good words from Bristol City Council or even other local authorities. It doesn't mean they're going to change their practice. And I think if there is a connection, and that's probably where we need to dive deeper into the data, maybe we could go back to them on that. And as a councillor on Bristol City Council, I would be more than happy to try, because there is a lot of frustration, I think, amongst councillors across the chamber. Just to explain, this has been caused because Bristol, a couple of years ago, as a budget-saving measure, cut 1/3 of its capacity to deal with fly tipping, despite the fact fly tipping has increased by 100% in the city over the last 10 years. So that was my first bit. I'm not too sure if there is a connection, though, with housing land in Bristol or not, with the increase in secondary deliberate fires.
I think we would struggle sometimes with the data with regard to that. So we have a national recording system that every fire and rescue service organises its data under. We do try and influence that. It hasn't changed for a while. It is changing in the next year or so with regard to question sets of what is being asked. But with things like where fires is what loosely prescribed as loose refuge, it doesn't talk about then to say, okay, does it look like it was fly tipping, or is it just loose refuge being set lied to? So we would struggle to differentiate between the two. And also on the data, it doesn't ask who we think is the owner of the land. And I think for quite legitimate reasons, a lot of the time the crews wouldn't know when they're out fighting fires in that way who the owner of the land is. But we certainly have accurate data where we can map them and locate them. So it is something potentially we could look at sharing with partners about the locations of the instance to see if there's more that we do.
But I think that could be useful, even if we're just sharing where the fires were with Bristol, and then asking them to analyse, is there any correlation or not between whether or not there's an increase in housing land, fires on housing land or not. I mean, it may not be. But my second point actually was about the deliberate vehicle fires. So, I mean, not always, but quite often these can be abandoned vehicles that are then set on fire in a secondary incident. So I have found that about 20 years ago, I know we had a really good partnership for the removal of deliberate vehicles, which was to reduce vehicle fires, because I think it was estimated that the cost of a deliberate vehicle fire was £4,000 to £5,000, that being the sort of cost of activating a crew to go out there and see to a deliberate fire. So we used to be able to remove an abandoned vehicle within an hour or two of reporting. And that was a partnership between the unitary authorities and the fire authority. And it's my belief that cannot exist any longer, because it is not uncommon for abandoned vehicles to stay abandoned in my ward for well over a year because of Bristol City Council not being able to remove them, not having the capacity or the will. Is there a partnership? And is there a way that we can improve that? Because although I notice there's not a substantial increase in deliberate fires, that could simply be because we're being lucky. Because there are many abandoned cars in my ward which thankfully have not been set on fire, but could have been.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, Councillor, I think we do have a partnership, we do have a reporting system within service around abandoned vehicles, but that solely relies on crews identifying an abandoned vehicle, not a member of the public. So that's an internal process that we have. I can't give you the assurance that vehicles are removed within 1 to 2 hours anymore. They used to be. I think that the time has been expanded, so I'm not sure exactly what their commitment is to removing that vehicle in time spans. But we do have a process in place.
So can I just say that process is not working at a council level in Bristol at all? I mean, there are abandoned vehicles I report again and again and again, and they just stay abandoned on the streets. I particularly have a problem where I think I have some car dealers and recovery companies that may be abandoning vehicles on the street, so we may have a higher level than some other areas. But it is a continuous problem where no action is taken to remove those abandoned vehicles. And I say, I think we have been lucky that those vehicles have not been set on fire, and I realise what a waste of resource when they are. That's something I'll go back to Bristol City Council about, because that's who I report abandoned vehicles to. Maybe I should be reporting to the Fire Authority.
Can I just, I'm feeling a bit nervous about this conversation because it is drifting off into the politics of, from the Fire Authority, if you like, criticising another local authority.
Is a member of that local authority criticising
okay,
them, so
but
I think that's fine.
I think we've got to be really careful that we actually concentrate on the fire issues. But what I would probably suggest, and I'd like perhaps some thought about the relationship between the fire authority and the local authorities, because it is fairly clear to me that the partnership working, which used to be very good, is perhaps now become a bit diverse, and it might be sensible for us perhaps to have a report at some stage in the future about the relationships we have with the local authorities, because as local authorities we have a responsibility in terms of the community, and in terms of the fire authority we have a responsibility in terms of the community. So there is, I think, some sense perhaps in us having a discussion about those relationships with the local authorities, because it is a crucial issue moving forward.
Chair, just before you pass that on, I'll just say thank you. That would be great. Just say I wasn't making political points. The whole report was about our relationship with the local authority on tackling this problem, and I was pointing out that from my experience, it's not working from the local authority side. It was not a criticism of the fire authority, but I think it is important, because obviously Bristol makes up 40% of the area of this fire authority, and they have to be a good partner, and I suspect they currently are not being.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. You're very good at putting points over. Matt, can I ask you to just respond, please?
Yeah,
can I, in terms of background, when we had the issue around clean air zone in Bath, there was an issue where I spoke to the council's chief executive and asked how regularly they spoke to you or your predecessor, and the answer was, well, we don't really. So that's the reason why I picked up the general point, because I think it is important between the four local authorities that we have got a relationship moving forward. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you for the question. Just to provide reassurance, so I have regular contact and meetings with all of the chief executives across all of our unitary authority, including the West of England Combined Authority. And my focus is to build and strengthen our partnerships across all parts of the communities that we serve. And a tangible example of that is the van and curbside dwellers challenges that we've seen within Bristol and wider, and that is a vulnerable member of our community, and I've had direct engagement with the Chief Executive of Bristol City Council. Luke has got direct engagement with the executive level, and we are working in partnership to tackle those issues. So again, I will raise this in my next one-to-one, but we've got strong partnerships, and we work together across all of the unitary authorities to make our community safer.
Tip, do you want to make further comment?
I think I've made my points that I don't think things are working well in
Okay.
Bristol. But
So-
as I say, that wasn't a criticism of the fire authority.
No, but I just try to keep away from politics as much as we can, but it was a strong message. David, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah,
Yes,
a couple of questions, please, Chair. Really good to see a lot of green in the tracker, but the question is, are the targets ambitious enough, and how is comparison with other peer groups of fire authorities used to make sure the targets are stretching enough? And that was the first question. The other question was, On Appendix 2, there's reference to welfare checks, and that seems quite low, not meeting the target. And given the issue around the importance of improving the culture, which is on a journey, to use that expression, what's being done to rectify that? So 2 bits there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think in relation to the first point, David, I think the targets have been ambitious, and I purposely set the targets last year to be an ambitious target for home fire safety visits. We're still struggling to get there, for being brutally honest about it. We can see it in the data that you've got before you today. That's why we've had to respond in a different way. So we're now looking at the productivity piece and the capacity piece I just spoke about in the previous question. That is going to give us some really useful data to make more targeted approach and drive the volume. Our previous approach has been around tackling the most vulnerable people in the community. That's great to a point because they're the most at risk. Other fire and rescue services carry out more volume than us because they also tackle a large volume of low-risk people in the community. Our resources in the last few years have been based on those higher-risk people, but now we're going to open up to the medium and lower-risk people around the community, so our volume will naturally increase because of that.
Thank you, Luke. Yasin, can I just ask that we keep it fairly brief now because the time's going on, and I've got 1 or 2 quick queries at the end.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to take too much. What I need just to add is we heard what also Tim mentioned, but what we need is the report also included. If we're going to have more intelligence services through the police, as a local council Lawrence said, we have received a lot of people doing, especially the weekends, deliberately, these fires. So if we have more involvement with the police, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got just a couple of quick queries because this is for approval today. So I'll be taking a vote in a minute, but I also just wanted to ask a question. Simon, you go along to the policy committee and to this committee, and it's a governance question I want to ask Shazir, if I can, about what's the value added of this committee in terms of your performance report to this body. So can I just jotted a note to Shazir,
yeah.
so she's
Yes.
ready to answer that question for me.
So, Chair, the purpose of this committee is set out in your terms of reference, and basically you're here to help Policy and Resources Committee. So if they're making decisions or they've made a decision that you feel needs a bit more work, you're adding that value. You're asking the questions that need to be asked before we get to the meeting, so we can actually make sure those reports are fit for purpose, and Robin particularly can make sure he's got that data, that evidence, that information. So this is all really helpful. It's part of the sequencing of meetings. It's very normal.
Thank you very much.
And the other question was...
you made mention about the prevention exercise that you're carrying out. Could we perhaps have
a timescale when you could report back to this committee? Would it be at the next meeting or the meeting after?
Yeah, I think for a full set of data that we can have some tangible evidence that would be appropriate for this committee, I would like to give it at least 6 months. So I would say skip the next meeting and come to the following meeting after that.
Right. Yeah. Make sure that's minuted, please. Thank you. So can I thank you? It's been a very full report, and it's really nice. Every single member of this committee has spoken today, so I think that's a good credit to you and the quality of the report that you produce. So thank you very much. So I'm now going to just put it to the vote. Is anybody against the report? Anybody abstaining? So I think we've approved the report moving forward. So thank you very, very much. So we're now going to move on to the internal audit report. We've got Matt and Mark with us this morning. Over to you.
So we'll start with the stock and store management report, and then we'll move on to the progress report afterwards, as it's set out within the pack. So just to quickly introduce it in terms of the work that we've done, so the coverage as per the scope in the report. We looked at policies and procedures, we looked at finance, which was covering purchase cards and some of the purchase techniques. We were looking at storage methods, so safety, refresh and removal of stock, access controls, reconciliations we looked at as stock to accounts, inventory counts, and then testing of all of those areas. So you'll appreciate it was quite a large scope. And a thank you to Anne-Marie and Rachel, who accommodated us to do a good proportion of that work, and yeah, we're very transparent in terms of the areas. So for scene setting, up front, when we were scoping this work, it was recognised as an area where improvement was needed. There had been some changes in the team, which was impacting in terms of capacity. There was ongoing work that was in relation to replacing systems, and then the audit was then looking from that lens of what advice and insight can we give to help build essentially a roadmap over the next 12 to 18 months. In terms of the conclusion of the work, so the key themes that came out of it were a lot of the processes were heavily manual. They were reliant on certain individuals and the knowledge that they held. Mainly those sat to the right of me. The systems that were in place weren't necessarily fit for purpose, and there were a number of interventions that needed to be put in place and workarounds to be able to use those systems. As I say, team very much aware of that, and there was already work ongoing, but we came in at a point in time where it was very much at that inflection point. So for actions for this report, I'll take it largely as read, so I don't want to go through it in detail, but the key ones really that came out in terms of areas of high priority were to establish the policy that reflects current practice. Obviously, that appreciate that the system coming in place could impact that, so it would need to be built around that side of it. Developing processes for the various systems that will be in use, and then embedding that new software within that framework, ensuring consistency to protect the individuals involved in the process, the organisation as well, but equally to drive that continuous improvement. Stock checks for fleet hadn't been happening up to the point of our work, so it was highlighting within that there are numerous risks around service delivery, value for money and space utilisation. And then finally, the stock reconciliations that weren't being conducted for PPE or fleet, so that's limiting assurance centrally on the stock levels and budgeting, as well as potentially under or overstating on accounts. So we've agreed a number of dates with the team between December 2025 and August 2026, recognising the new system will be a driver for a lot of what those actions are intending to implement. But the team were very accommodating and agreed all of the actions. So again, I just want to speak positively on those involved. Not to sound disingenuous given they're in the room, but throughout the work, they were very open about what the issues were and how we could help to put together actions that would drive improvement in those areas. So I'll pause there, open it up to the room, and if anyone from the team wants to speak to it before we open it up, then I'm happy to hand it over to them.
So, can I just check then, do you want to respond to this at this stage before we start to ask questions?
If I could, that would be good. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate what you're saying there. The majority of the issues raised in the audit we had already identified. And like you said, we'd had some issues with staffing, etc., and we were fully aware of what we needed to do to get the stores process where we needed it to be. At the time, and still at this moment, they're not in keeping with the needs of the service to be able to mitigate the risk between our fleet and central stores. The need for an efficient, fit-for-purpose IT system was identified shortly after I took over the role head of department about 18 months ago. The new system will replace 3 current systems, so we'll just have one source of information. It'll reduce manual input by 75% and therefore will reduce keystroke errors and missing information, enabling the department to gain tighter control of our stock and its distribution. It'll also provide quality data against which we'll be able to reconcile our regular monthly checks as highlighted in the audit. So moving forward, I think, yeah, the system is a key driver for this, and we're at the stage where we've awarded the contract and we are confident that we will have the system embedded and fully working within the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. David,
you wanted to ask a question? Yes, thank you, and thank you for the internal auditors and the team's response on this. Can I ask, just to put this into context, what's the value of the stock held in order to know the waste, please?
Without looking at figures, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Sorry, I didn't hear that reply.
No, so without looking at the figures on our system, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'm quite concerned about the first action that's coming out here on page 45 of SSMO1. It's not due to be completed till the 30th of June 2026. Considering it is a high priority and high urgency, why is it been taking so long to actually achieve it? I would hope that we would try to resolve it sooner rather than later, please.
If I can just say, this will form part of the process of the development in line with the new system. And as I just stated, we're not anticipating that being fully implemented until 18 months down the line. So we think that there will be significant progress prior to that, but I wouldn't want to sign off on that whole issue until the system is fully embedded and we're up and working.
Okay, so I do think we need to, as a committee, keep an eye on this because I think it's a really urgent and serious stuff to fix. So can we make sure that we have an updated report either at the next meeting or in 6 months at the very least, please? My microphone keeps...
Caroline?
Yeah, just to advise, in the next audit committee, you will get an update on all the internal audit actions that are outstanding. So in November, these fleet actions will be added to that update. None of them are actually due for completion by November, but you will get a commentary update. And then you get that update on the internal audit actions every 6 months. So you'll then get another report at the June committee, at which point I believe 10 out of the 12 actions are due for completion. So that's going to provide another opportunity for this committee to see the progress in terms of those actions. In the interim, just to reassure you that in our own internal governance structure, the senior leadership team also receive every quarter the internal audit action recommendations as well. And there's a chance for us to get assurance on an internal basis that they're progressing. And one of my teams every month goes out and asks for updates and checks. I do agree. I think that this audit has flagged a number of areas for improvement. It's not an area that's been audited, I believe, for some time. So it's very much highlighted to me that this is something we do need to consider revisiting again as an audit in the future, and I'll be assuring that it's not left for a significant amount of time before we go back and we commission another audit in that area.
Thank you. I look forward to receiving those reports.
Can I just add, so we have got an interim date of this, of the 31st of December of this year, and that was, I think, the June 26 date is more of a completion, whereas we have interim dates to make sure things are moving on the roll, progressing. And we've got a set of dates ahead of us where we're doing our own check on this to make sure things are moving in the right direction and it's not just being left for a future date.
Can we be very clear, though, that what we're talking about is Matt, you introduced a new system that's going to be brought in. In terms of the monitoring of this, we need to make sure that system, progress on that system, quite specifically is reported back to this committee, because I think that's a really important issue that we've got to make sure that we keep our, and I think that was the point that you were making. We've got to be careful it doesn't get lost in the administration of how we're dealing with the internal audit. Jane?
Apologies if it's in the report somewhere, but I'm just quite interested in mentioning a lot of obsolete stock, and I'm just wondering what the value of that obsolete stock is and what do we do with it? Are we able to sell it and realise some money against our lack of money, or is it so obsolete that that's not possible?
So from a central stores perspective, a lot of obsolete stock is generally no good to us anymore. So if it's PPE, it's been condemned by Bristol Uniforms or MSA, which is our provider of safety equipment, of safety PPE, sorry, and like our fire boots, helmets. If that's condemned, it's no longer fit for our purpose. I know we have a partnership with GAFSIP, which is Gambia, in Gambia, and we've got a partnership with them where we can donate kit surplus to us, which is no longer fit for our use, which they are happy to take because it's better than whether they don't have. So in that sense, everything is obviously asset disposed of from our point, and would be no no benefit to us. So it would end up in landfill as such.
Jane, do you want to come back on that?
I guess the follow-up on that is, like, whilst I really approve of the fact that it goes to Gambia and helps out a fire service in Africa, obviously it would be better if it didn't go obsolete in the first place. Presumably this new control system will better monitor when things are coming to the end of their life. Is that what it'll do?
Not with fire kit and PPE. The PPE goes through its own servicing with our MSA and Bristol uniforms. They're the ones that keep on top of that, and then they condemn it when it gets to the end of the life there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just like we would obviously want to minimise the amount of things that reach the end of their life before we've used them, which is why I was wondering if the stock control system would help with that.
Yes, I just want to pick up a point on a PPE, which is really difficult because of the contaminants issue that firefighters face with PPE and getting dirty, basically. The temperatures we wash our PPE and the frequency, the number of times they can be washed is limited because it loses its structural integrity and is not fit for purpose anymore. So some things are absolutely unavoidable and they just need to be disposed of. Others that we may be able to dispose of in the appropriate manner. But we have a really good process in place on how we dispose of assets. I think it's come to this meeting before, actually.
Yes, I suppose in my mind that where some redundant equipment has been used in another country, it just left me wondering a little bit about how do we dispose of redundant equipment as a fire authority, because it just strikes me that it's very nice to do that, and that's supporting those communities, but it's this community that has paid for that equipment, and should we be disposing of equipment more effectively, and do we have a plan for doing that effectively as an organisation? And I think I won't dwell on it any more than that, but I do think it is an issue about how does that system work moving forward. Okay, so thank you very much for that report. Is there anything else that we ought to be dealing with? Oh, sorry, David.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. So Caroline mentioned about a previous audit being carried out on this. It would be useful to know when that was, because I think there is an issue here around the internal audit plan as well, because this is clearly an area with some improvement, and I welcome the openness of offices and the steps that are being taken. Clearly, that's right. However, is this, the question is quite, I hope it's not too challenging, but is this symptomatic of the control environment in the authority? And are any other lessons going to be learned that can be transferable? And the final point is, Councillor Wilcox mentioned about the valuation. There's a question I was going to ask. It would be nice to know the value to get the context of the issue here. That would be very, very helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
All right, please, Matt.
I will get the information regarding the valuations, and I will share that with you. Just reiterate the first part to me again, please. Sorry.
I was outlining the fact that this is clearly an issue that has, I won't say it's that way. I wanted to know when the previous audit was carried out, and I also wanted to know, is this symptomatic, and I hope it's not, I'm assuming it's not, of the control environment elsewhere, and are any lessons being learned that are transferable? Those are the questions.
Thank you, David. Verity, I think you want to just make a comment, and then I'll come back to you, Caroline.
Apologies, it's not going to answer your question. That question, it's going to be more around the valuation. So I know the number that's in the accounts is around £300,000. That might not be everything that we treat as stock in stores, but that might just give a little bit of context that the stuff that we treat from a finance perspective as stock is around £300,000.
Yes, I didn't actually say this had been audited before. What I said was it hasn't been audited for, I believe, that's all right, some time. I've been here 3 years, and when I joined, I looked back at 3 or 4 years, and I couldn't see a previous audit. So it's flagged to me the need to make sure this is an area that's looked at and has more assurance going forward.
So, sorry, Chair, so just to be clear, that we're not aware of an audit in this area before?
No, I'm not saying that there is not, hasn't been one, but it certainly hasn't been done for some time, because it's not been done in the time I've been here, and it wasn't showing in the historic records the last 2-3 years I looked back on before I joined.
Thank you. And I think in actual fact, just standing back, it shows that the system is working. The fact that the internal audit have looked at this and there's been a positive response to that, you know, a great credit to you. And the role of this committee is just to make sure that everything that's been promised is delivered. So I think at this point I'll move on, and thank you all very much for your contributions. And oh, sorry, Matt.
It was just to make maybe a bit of a concluding statement, but I think it comes back to the councillor's question earlier, which is when looking at the timelines and agreeing it for this piece of work, we always look at it from the view of they should be sufficiently challenging, but not unrealistic to be able to achieve. And also in terms of the setting of these actions, while there will be interim solutions that are put in place, we would be looking at what is the timeline it takes to wholly and fully implement a solution that responds to the risk in question. So it's worth noting for this work, we haven't looked at it as what's the low-hanging fruit, what are the quick fixes. The teams have very much acknowledged there's fundamental change that needs to be undertaken. So to set a timeline that would be sooner would be disingenuous to this committee and potentially then just require extensions. So we've been very candid about how long it will take, but equally, as Caroline mentions, that ongoing reporting should give you that comfort and assurance in the interim about the steps that are being taken. So it was just, I suppose, to sum up the report with that, to give some confidence to the committee.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on then. I think the next item is you, Luke, if I remember rightly, about the fire
Sorry,
control.
Chair, we've got our progress report just to briefly take you through, if that's okay. So just a few points really for the committee to note on the progress report. Obviously, you've had the first piece of work, which we've just discussed from the plan. The second piece of work we did actually start, which was the piece of work on prevention, but it coincided with the timing of the inspectorate inspection, and so not surprisingly we were asked to delay that piece of work. So we have done, but we just wanted the committee to note that. But that piece of work will obviously continue and will come through, currently planned to come through to the December meeting. So a slight delay on that piece of work, but we're comfortable with the reasons for that. And then just also to note that within the plan, there is a contingency element, and we've been discussing with management how we might best use that. We're currently scoping a piece of work to look at the new provider for pensions and the integration arrangements around that to ensure that the data and the controls and the reporting, etc., looking forwards will be appropriate. So that will be the use of the contingency for the plan. And the final point I just wanted to note, which does pick up on the point around action implementation, is that we've heard how you get a 6-monthly report from management about the status of the implementation of action. So are they implemented? Have they met their implementation dates? We also periodically report back to you about the accuracy of management's closure of those actions. And this report is telling you that management have said that they think that 9 actions are complete. We have been in, tested, and we are comfortable that there is evidence to confirm that all of those 9 actions have been appropriately actioned and completed. So that's the final part of the jigsaw to give you that confirmation that the actions are implemented. So going back to where we were on the action tracking for the stores report, the final part will be at a committee in the future. We will report that management have said they've done those actions, and we've confirmed that they've been implemented. But that will be obviously at some future committee meeting.
Mark, thank you. That's very reassuring. As a councillor, it's nice to hear you say that, and it is important for us to make sure that these things are delivered. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'm aware that the time's moving on, and we've still got quite a few items on the agenda. So can I hand over the next item to you, Luke, please?
Great, thank you, Chair. This is on page 85 of your reports. And this is an update on the fire control cultural review that RSM completed for us. Members will be aware that back in November last year, we asked RSM to carry out a cultural review of control, and that we believe at the time we were the first fire and rescue service in the country to carry out a cultural review of a specific team. So today I'm going to be asking you to firstly scrutinise the report and then consider and challenge the ongoing implementation of the programme that we've got in place. I'm just going to pick out some key points of the report and the progress so far and some of the challenges that we're facing. Members will probably remember that we had a change in leadership in that control team, and we put a new temporary group manager in place, which has been a step change from how we've always crewed and staffed that team previously. It's always been somebody who has came up through the ranks within control. Back then, that was appropriate, but now we wanted a different approach in terms of culture and leadership, so we put a manager from the operational side of the service into that team. And they've worked really, really hard to date to understand the RSM report, speak to people within the teams and be really, really visible, not just around the control teams, but the other stakeholders that we've got in the service who can help promote that journey of changing the culture within control. So they basically looked at the 12 recommendations from RSM and split them into 4 different pillars. Those pillars are talent, custom practices and structure, direction in leadership, and transparency. And I'll just go into each of those in a small amount of detail to try to offer you some assurance. So in terms of talent, control staff felt there was a lack of opportunity around the organisation for development and moving across the organisation to carry out different roles. They are on a different contract to operational members of staff, and they are on a different pay scale and pension scheme as well. So that's still a challenging barrier for us, but not just Avon, that's a national challenge that we're facing. But since the report has come out and the new manager has been in there, we've opened up jobs across other grey book roles for members of control to apply for, and we've currently got 2 job adverts out at the moment that they're eligible to apply for, so that's a positive step. Leadership development, we've also got a temporary station manager role available, so that is only going to be specific to control teams, so control watch managers can apply for that themselves. That's going to give them an element of development over the next 6 months. We've got a service-wide promotion policy. Because of the uniqueness of control and how they work, and the rank structure is slightly different to the rest of the organisation, we're engaging with them to help build a specific promotion policy for control that is just relevant to them as a team. And we've had some really great buy-in from those teams to help us promote that policy. And we've also resolved 3 temporary promotions because that was an issue with stability within the control teams as well. So we've substantiated 3 posts, one at Watch Manager B, Watch Manager A, and Crew Manager level as well. So that's offered a sense of stability amongst those teams as well. In relation to customs practices and structure, we're just going through an office redesign of one of the offices at Lansdowne, and that is 2 aims really. One is to bring all the middle managers into one office space together so they can collaborate in a different way and build a better type of relationship, if you like, and working practices. But we're also going to open it up to a booking system where people across the whole service can use it as a hub and also work there as well. So that cross-population will help as well. We've got a workload tracking live digital system, which is really helpful. So anybody across the control teams and senior managers can log in to look at the workload tracker and see how tasks are being delivered and when they're due to be delivered. And we've also really improved on our comms as well. So we've got a fortnightly control comms that goes out to all the teams in form of like a mini sort of email sort of newspaper type product that goes out. In terms of direction and leadership, one really, really important factor that the group manager and station manager have set up is called a control shift programme. SHIFT stands for support. Here include facilitate and transform. And we've asked for representatives from every single team in control, and they meet on a regular basis, and they have something at every meeting called the Big Five Takeaways, and they're detailed in the appendices that you've got within your pack. Really, really good stakeholder engagement from everybody across control. And on a watch level, a member of a watch is a representative, and they go and feed in any issues or any sort of improvements that they see that we need to make, and also celebrate the success that we've been having as well. We've also engaged with our DICE team across the service who have been in to help with their expertise as well and changing that culture as well. When we look at transparency, we've now got digital whiteboards across that team as well, and they help create a digital safe working space for feedback and dialogue, because it's a non-anonymous whiteboard. You can just write a comment or some feedback, and we don't know who's read, but we act on that and we put it into an action plan. Every month we have a staff survey that goes out as well. That's really useful. It's only a 2-question survey, but it does give us a bit of evidence around how well some of this is being embedded and some of the improvements or for the challenges that we've got. We've also got a journey rule in control as well, which is a fantastic sort of resource. It is at the back of the control room behind the officer in charge, and is like a road map, is a pictorial of where we were, where we want to be, the successes and the challenges that we're trying to overcome as well. And it's for everybody who goes into that room can just add into that story wall at the same time. I think in terms of governance, from my perspective and the area manager's perspective, we've got a digital work programme set up. I can log in at any time to view that progress, which is assuring for myself. I'm also very visible, as are other members of the Service Leadership Board, in control. Our flexi-duty officers, when they're on duty on the weekend, they now frequently have meetings at control on a Saturday morning to go and meet people and discuss relevant issues with the control teams, to be visible. So that's working really well. And obviously we report back in here as part of governance and scrutiny as well. I also really want to get across the point, this isn't fixed at control by any means. I need to be brutally honest there. This is a long-term piece of work and culture change that is going to take an amount of time to do. We've had some good successes. We're embedding a different way of working. The crews are fully engaged, and as long as they stay fully engaged, I really believe that we can change that culture and control, but it will take time. I'll just stop there and open up to any questions.
Luke, thank you. Any questions? David?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Luke, for the report. You alluded to the journey wall behind the manager has a statement about where you want to be as a result of this review, but it's not actually defined in this report. So I'd really like to understand what are the yardsticks of success on making the control room environment better for the people who work in there, please.
Absolutely. I think poor culture within the control room. So we've got people dashboards set up away from control around staff retention. So that will be one indicator. But it's also that, I think that's really hard to gauge at times, is that tangible feeling when you walk into that team, and that feeling you get as a senior leader or any leader across the organisation, that feeling you get around how comfortable, how happy people are, how happy they are to challenge us as senior leaders or other managers. That's been missing. They don't feel as if they could have done that before. So I think it's a multifaceted answer, but I think is that feeling you get when you walk into the control room about how happy people are and how they want to perform their roles. They're really, really dedicated team. That's not changed. They're really, really good at their jobs. They perform really well in terms of KPIs. That's never been the issue. It's just that feeling about how they're performing as a team and how they're interacting with middle managers.
Thank you. Can I?
That one's good, sorry.
Pardon?
That one's.
Oh, couldn't see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. I think that's a really key question. How do we measure success? And we've started a touchpoint survey, so that goes out across the whole organisation. And the metric we're using to measure people's feelings and how they are engaging and how they feel supported at work is through the SCARF model. So it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness and fairness. And the focus is, and this is part of our new people, culture and leadership strategy that we've just signed off at PRC recently. It aligns to the National Fire Chief people, culture and leadership strategy. So we need to be able to measure the shift in cultural change. It's got to be tangible. So absolutely, as Luke says, it's a belief system. It's about how people feel when they come to work. They feel supported, they feel there's fairness, but it's also about measuring the key metrics. So the aim of the touchpoint survey is that we'll stick to the same measure each time so that we can see the shift. That's across the whole organisation. Control were part of that touchpoint survey. I believe we had approximately over 40% engagement in the touchpoint survey. That's very high for a staff cultural survey. We'd like it to be higher. Control were well represented within that. So we will measure each of the interventions that we put in place to make sure it's having a tangible impact through that touchpoint survey, but also through the local engagement and also people metrics. So we've got new people dashboard, things like leaver rates, sickness, grievance, disciplinary issues, those kind of wider organisational people metrics. You would expect to see those going in a more positive direction. Sometimes you might see an uptick, and that might be that people feel empowered because there's high psychological safety in the organisation where people feel that they can raise issues internally, and I'd welcome that across the whole organisation. If we're not getting it right, please tell us as a service leadership board. So it's hearts and minds. It's us making sure we visit Control regularly. I've visited every watch on Control and the management team, speaking to them regularly, making sure we're heading in the right direction, but also measuring through the touchpoint survey and also measuring our people metrics.
Matt, thank you very much. And I think that was the question I was going to ask. So well done for picking that up, because I think that's really important that you actually do measure how staff are reacting to things. And the other element, which I think is really important, is this was an independent review. And that then brings a greater scrutiny, I think, to it from our point of view. So I think it's a really positive report. In terms of us as a committee, this is obviously, if you're changing the culture, as you rightly say, it's going to be quite long. It'd be quite handy, I think, really, for the people who work there, if you wouldn't mind doing a follow-up report. I'll leave that to your timescale, but I do think it would be worthwhile, because I think it's been important, and I know there's been a long history of problems in that section, so I think it would be really good for us to have that feedback. David?
Just a comment, Chair, actually. I'm really pleased to hear that senior management is also seeing with their own eyes what's happening. And it seems to be a nice mix of that, being visible and observing and collecting data, which when we had the report, the November 24 report, which was a difficult read, let's be blunt about it, I think what we're seeing here is some structured approach, which also has the softer approach attached to it, which is testing whether or not it's being successful. So clearly it's early days yet. I think it's entirely appropriate that it's been mentioned that it's not fixed yet. That's absolutely right. HMI will always say it's a long journey, but I think what we can conclude from this is that it's a positive trajectory that this is on. And I would welcome your suggestion, Chair, that we have updates back at some appropriate stage. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just think it's worth raising the point as well. I think we're carrying out some really good focus work here, and other areas of the organisation can learn from what we're doing in Control, so we need to share that across the organisation as well in terms of organisational learning. So that's really key for us as well, to promote cultural change in other areas.
That's good. Right.
So thank you very much, Luke, and I think that was really positive. Moving forward then, business continuity. I think as an organisation, of course, fire authorities are incredibly vulnerable. So at this point, I'll hand over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm not going to read through the whole report. I'll just take some give you some key updates, really. So first of all, on 3.2, pleased to report that my team is now fully staffed. We had a vacancy held over for a little while, but our second team member joined in May this year. Both of our team members have been assigned mentors. We're part of the NFCC Business Continuity Group, which runs a mentoring scheme. So both team members have been assigned mentors from other fire services as well to support their learning. 3.3, the internal audit update. So the evidence for the final outstanding audit action has now been provided and is awaiting sign-off. So I believe there's a meeting in October which will confirm hopefully that one can be signed off as complete. The reason for the extension was it related to IT, so we just needed to align that action with the ongoing IT work that was Tom was undertaking. Sorry. In terms of our risk scoring, I'm anticipating that our BC risk scores will remain static due to our ongoing work on business continuity. So in terms of our 4 key elements, which are listed under section 5, failure to plan and prepare for known risk is the first element. So following the review of our tactical plan template, we're now moving on to operational level. Currently, I've just reviewed all of our operational plans to bring them into date. Those will be now being sent out to plan owners just to approve those. During this month, we've also been completing station visits, working with crews to identify local risks, raise awareness and test BC knowledge through a range of what-if questions. Following on from that, we'll also be reviewing our business impact analysis template to ensure that it captures the information that we need to inform our BC planning. And that's particularly in relation to any changes and updates in IT systems as those come online. So this piece of work will require our transfer of existing information into a new template and review that with document owners. So we are programming in meetings with owners as soon as we can following September. Section 5.3, failure to validate and review plans. Our service plan commitment is that we deliver 2 strategic exercises per year. Our first one was completed in May, focused on power outage, and we have a second one scheduled for October, so we are on target for meeting that service plan objective. In addition to that, we also delivered an exercise as part of our Flexi Officers Development Day, and that was focused on loss of a station and relocation plans and challenges. Section 5.4, failure to identify or implement learning from events. Currently, our debriefs and recommendations are monitored through the BC Steering Group. We are now going to look into whether this process could or should be part of our operational assurance process, just to bring that into alignment. But that's early stage discussions at the moment, so no progress as yet. 5.5, failure to deliver training to staff. Again, one of our audit actions was to refresh our Milo e-learning package, and that one has been completed and signed off. And section 5.6, as previously mentioned, we are part of the NFCC Business Continuity and Resilience Group. This group meets twice a year for information sharing. So it's 2 in-person meetings a year, and the next one's being hosted next month by Kent. We also have monthly online catch-ups, which are also attended by our MHCLG representatives as well. So the group is a valuable resource for information sharing and learning. As mentioned earlier, we've got the mentor scheme. We also have a peer review scheme. We've been matched with Durham and Darlington Fire Service, so we'll be contacting them to arrange peer review in due course. And one of the other things coming from this group is we're currently working on a sector-specific guidance document for business continuity. That's the first draft is being presented at the meeting in Kent. That will provide a framework that all fire services can adhere to for business continuity to promote consistency approach. That's all currently. Any questions?
Thank you, Claire. David, you've asked some questions which, as I understand it, are likely to be in exempt session because obviously this is quite sensitive to the organisation generally. But generally speaking, I try to avoid things going into exempt session if I can. But if any of those questions you've got to ask which you don't think need to go, that we'll go into exempt session afterwards. Anybody else got any questions for Claire? Right, Onkar first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. So just a question, like, this year, obviously we've seen some extreme weather events. So how are the lessons from recent activations, such as, like, these extreme weather events being fed back into the plans?
So we do have internal debriefs. Also, we are part of the local resilience forum, so extreme weather events obviously impact the whole community, not just fire service. So any events that meet the criteria will have a multi-agency debrief through the local resilience forum as well. And lessons from that will be fed back now through the operational learning and feedback group.
Yeah, a brief question about peer review. Will that lead to a formal output, a report, or is this more mentoring in effect? If you could just give me some information on that, that would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's essentially along the same lines as audit, really. You decide with your partner service which elements you'd like to review and agree that, and so we can set the scope for what we'd like to review where we feel that there's a need for extra input and learning.
I've been through your questions with Shazir, and I'm quite happy when we get to the point of going into exempt session, if we can pick those up. But there were some that were not in exempt session, but we'll get responses to those questions for you properly moving forward. So can I thank you, Claire? It really is important for this authority, the work that you do with everybody, because it is something we hope never happens, but when it does, we need to make sure that we've got those plans in place and we learn from that for the next time. Hopefully it never happens again, but thank you very much. Okay, so moving on then, we've got the corporate risk register. Lorna, we had a brief discussion before the meeting started about how the system works, and I very much welcome your report today because it really is important. The risk is always, when it's near the end of the agenda, that it gets pushed over, but it is really important, I think, that we actually understand how the system works, how the system perhaps could be changed moving forward, and where the major risks are and how we're dealing with those. Bearing in mind that it's very easy to blame the person reporting on risk, but it's the actual implications are really important for everybody else. So over to you, Lorna.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. Good morning again, members. So I'd like to present this paper today that starts on page 105 for your scrutiny. The Corporate Risk Register is subject to regular review by the SLT and is presented to this committee 4 times a year, twice a year in full and twice a year as an exception. So today we have the full Corporate Risk Register being presented. As you know, each risk owner regularly monitors and reports on the risk events that sit within their remit. They consider the effectiveness of existing controls in mitigating against the likelihood and/or impact of a risk event occurring in the present risk environment. This allows them to calculate a current risk score, which is presented here today and we will go through. Risk owners also provide details of any planned actions or contextual factors that are relevant to the management of their risks. If I can ask you to please turn to page 106 of your committee paper, which is actually the second page of the cover paper. The paragraphs under section 5 provide context on the current position of corporate risks in the service. This will support your oversight of the risk register, help with the consideration of the details that we will go through in appendices 1 to 3 and discussions on how risks are being managed. 85% of the risk events are within tolerance, and those outside of tolerance are receiving regularly additional scrutiny by the SLT and SLB. The corporate risk register is not staying stagnant. There are additions and removals of corporate risks, which means that it's managed dynamically to reflect how risk events should be captured, assessed, monitored and reported When we go through Appendix 2 in a moment, we'll see the reasons for the removal of 9 risk events and the addition of 1. As summarised at the top of page 107, the development of key strategies in service is important for our risk management framework, and links to local risk registers to the corporate risk register will be further developed over the next 6 months so that we can use risk data and have escalation and de-escalation to support the decisions of working groups, steering groups, and ensure that we're meeting our strategic objectives. So if I can ask you to turn to page 109, where the dashboard of risk event scores are shown. This is Appendix 1. The visual representation of the risk events here that are on our corporate risk register has the current risk scores as of the 30th of July, when they were reviewed by the SLT. There are 51 risk events shown here, presented in each riskometer or risk category to which they align, remembering that each risk event is held to account and colour-coded in relation to the different risk appetite and tolerance that are set and reviewed by the Service Leadership Board. Please note security riskometer is not shown here, as these risk events are reported as exempt. 4 corporate risk events are shown in red font, as they are currently out of tolerance, and 1 is written in blue, where the risk score has changed since this last committee meeting in June. These 5 risk events are presented in full detail in Appendix 2, so if we can now please turn to page 111. In this appendix, we have the full tables for the risk events flagged in the dashboard in Appendix 1, plus the details of the risk events that have been added or removed from the risk register since this last meeting. And I'll go through these briefly now. So first of all, we have 4 tables for the risk events with current risk scores out of tolerance. 3 of these were reported as out of tolerance to this committee on the 20th of June, and the 4th one is the new risk event that was added to the risk register in July. Starting with CR 15.3, which is a pensions risk around failure to acquire accurate data from Bristol City Council. This score has remained at 20, probable major, due to concerns around data inaccuracies and historic issues with pension contributions. The current situation is being reported as more reassuring, and it is anticipated that the risk score will soon be reduced, and the next full corporate risk register report is to the October SLT meeting, and the risk owner anticipates that that will be reduced at the time. Moving on to page 112, we have CR 19.2, which is failure to plan and deliver the medium-term financial plan efficiency savings requirements within the agreed timeframes. This risk event is receiving much scrutiny at all levels of leadership and via a number of reporting mechanisms. At the SLT meeting next Wednesday, CR19 is undergoing a deep dive discussion with explorations of the current RAG status of the efficiencies and saving options that are currently under review. The Efficiencies and Savings team also have a local risk register which adds assurance to how CR 19.2 is being managed. On page 113, we have CR 19.4. This is the new risk event that's been added to the risk register as of the 30th of July, and is failure to manage the exit of the Seven Park PFI contract and secure the site for Avon Fire and Rescue Services' future use. This risk event was added to the risk register on the 30th of July, captures the importance of managing the risks associated with this vital project and the complexities under the risk causes and consequences, which are fully detailed here. And there's a big collaboration piece going on. And again, this will be reported to the SLT next week as part of the CR19 deep dive. And then finally, in this subsection on page 114, we have the financial risk event, CR 20.1, lack of appropriate funding to adequately fulfil the service's aims and objectives. This risk event remains at 20, probable major, due to the ongoing funding uncertainties. It's subject to a deep dive along with CR19 at the SLT meeting next week, which aligns quite well for efficiencies and savings and funding and resources to be discussed at the same time. On page 115, we have the full table for the risk event where the risk score was reduced, and that has happened since the June meeting of this committee. So this is CRO 4.1, failure to recruit operational staff, whole time and on call. The current score had been increased back in April from 15 to 20 due to the risk of carrying too many vacancies later in the year following the cancellation of the whole time recruitment. The measures to mitigate this risk were discussed and then agreed in May and are detailed at the top of page 116, and these are now reported as progressing well. So this risk score was reduced back to 15 by the SLT on the 30th of July. The remainder of Appendix 2 outlines the risk events that have been removed from the corporate risk register since this last meeting of this committee on the 20th of June. So firstly, on page 116 under CRO3 Response and Rescue, CRO 3.1 reduction in number of operational staff was agreed for removal in July, as the area of risk is better managed under CRO 3.2 failure to crew appliances to minimal levels. It was discussed that there had been duplication across these two risk events, and the SLT agreed that management via CRO 3.2 would be more effective and efficient. On page 118, you can see that CRO 3.6 was agreed for removal, which was inability to comply with medical monitoring schedule. This is now actually being monitored as a key risk indicator within CRO 3.2, and it is currently showing as on our people dashboard at 81.2%. So, but it is going to be monitored elsewhere, so that was agreed for removal. Also on this page is CRO 5 procurement. CRO 5.7, lack of specialist knowledge to the service. This was removed following its merger with CRO 5.6, which is the risk event having a name edit to incorrect goods, services or works purchased. That had been agreed with the SLT back in April, and then that merger occurred in July. On page 119, we have CR 13.5, which is detailed as having been removed. This was the extended loss of availability to local area network and was removed in July following the completion of the Land Refresh project. Loss of availability is now managed under the risk event CR 13.3 by the head of ICT. And finally, in this Appendix 2, details are provided for the decision at the June SLT meeting to remove CR 14 Fire Authority Assurance, including the 5 separate risk events that sat within this risk area. Rather than managed as a risk in itself, the Fire Authority governance and assurance arrangements are now best viewed as part of our risk management framework rather than as a risk itself. So in terms of the remaining 3 appendices that support the scrutiny of the full risk register, Appendix 3 on page 121 provides a summary of the 51 risk events in the full register as of the 30th of July. This provides you with the additional context for the current risk scores and assurance of how the risk events are being monitored by risk owners and service leaders. On Appendix 4 on page 125, you have the risk scoring matrix and definitions of likelihood and impact. Appendix 5 on page 127 shows the current schedule of planned corporate risk deep dive presentations to the SLT. So that concludes my presentation of the corporate risk register. Thank you very much for listening, and I'd like to open up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm almost speechless. I think this is, no, it's really good because these are the major corporate risks for the authority and are really, really important. Can I just ask around the room just to see whether perhaps some training around how this system works would be really good, because it is absolutely crucial to any organisation that the risk register is dealt with sensibly at a meeting like this. And under those circumstances, perhaps there might be some case for us to be thinking about that. I've got Onkar first and then you, Kieran. And then David.
Thank you, Chair. So just a question about the recruitment. So we mentioned here, like, the March 2026 training school. So just in case if that delays, so where we stand to ensure we have a safe crew levels?
Yeah, I can come in there, Councillor. We've got an existing board steering group set up called the Operational Resource Management Group, and their sole focus is to look at the operational crew and on fire stations. So we did have a training school planned for the autumn this year, which we've then delayed until March. So to bridge that gap of operational resilience and the potential shortfall we had, we've done a number of things. So we've just completed an external transfer process. So we've brought 10 people in from fire and rescue services around the country. That was a really positive move for us because we took on these 10 firefighters who were already fully qualified drivers and had other specialist skills that's bolstered our resilience in other areas. And we're also carrying out short-term contracts for our on-call to come across the whole time for specific amounts of time. So that's been really useful as well to help build our resilience.
Kieran?
Just a quick clarification on the one effect about the pension contributions, Bristol City Council. So am I right in thinking then, from what you've said, in October is when we expect the risk may change, presumably down, right? Because there's only one way to go. Is that when we'll be able to quantify roughly how much we do or do not think that the missed pension contributions... Sorry. You know what I mean, right? Can we quantify the breadth and depth of that by that time?
Yeah, I can come in on that one. I think there are a number of pension issues that are being investigated at the moment. It's kind of subject to legal advice as well at the moment, so it's not something that we can talk about in detail, but I imagine it would probably be a longer timescale than October to be able to quantify that.
David?
Just an observation about the content. Given the fact that we've touched upon culture quite a bit, I don't think the word culture appears at all in the risk register, from what I can see, and it's just a reflection. You may want to... The response may be that culture actually goes through everything, so therefore it's not going to get its own category, which is a reasonable response. But I've been looking at CR04, and that's where something may appear. There isn't any reference, I believe there isn't. Whether or not you wanted a separate category or you wanted to make sure it was adequately covered, but given the importance, it's something to reflect on. That's why I put it out there, that's the only reason. And the other thing is around the workforce resilience, making sure that that is safeguarded, because there seems to have been some improvement around recruitment, and that risk seems to be affected by that, but it's just that reassurance around that resilience.
Yeah, great. I think I could probably provide some further assurance for you there. We've had something called a Transfer and Promotions Board, a TAP board, which primarily it does focus on our operational crews, our resilience there. On Monday, we've got a kick-off meeting for something called the Strategic Establishment Group, and that's a very different focus. It's going to be a data-led decision-making forum, but it's across the whole organisation, so it's for our corporate members of staff and our operational, and that's going to give us a lot more strength in terms of resilience by managing it in a very different way. Yeah.
And can I just take your point? Sorry, Paula?
Thank you, and we may be touching on the same point just around culture, and it was just to give some assurances, but let you know that those discussions have happened if it should be its own risk event. As it stands at the moment, it is covered within CR 19.1 because it is still one of our causes of concern within the HMI. So we do cover that, and respect to the Policy Resources Committee, we cover it in that also, and moving forward, it's going to have culture in itself is going to have its own paper presented. So there's a lot more scrutiny on that now. We've also set up a new board to really focus on that programme of work, which is going to be led by the Culture Change Implementation Lead. So just to give you that assurance, there is a focus, although it's not in isolation.
So if I can just come back on that, I think it's important that we are reassured about that, because clearly it says there is reference to the improvements that are needed, but you feel that culture is adequately covered within that, and is that what you're stating?
Yeah, I'll hand back to Lorna, and yeah, it's just that to give you the assurance it is covered in the Policy Resources Committee. Okay. Would it be helpful if maybe we add that link into those fire authority papers in this, just to cross-map it? We can certainly do that.
And can I just add, because when I read it, thinking about the risk to the organisation, the HMI inspection, yes, we've started to move forward, but I can't see where that specifically mentioned it as a risk for the organisation. And I was rather surprised that we picked up all the individual bits, but we haven't picked up how the HMI rate this particular fire authority. So it just struck me that there was a major corporate risk there, possibly, for the chief executive moving forward. But it is something I think that I know that the policy committee regularly look at it, but in terms of it being a risk for the organisation, I was actually expecting to see that there.
Yeah, can I just add, we are planning on adding in a culture riskometer and risk category. It's part of the review that I'll be doing with the leadership board to look at whether our riskometers and risk categories are fit for purpose, and we do need to make some changes, including capturing a separate risk category that is called culture, looking also at introducing an environmental risk category, maybe getting rid of our reputational one because we capture that as part of our risk impact and consequences anyway. We have got some risk events that need to go onto the risk register, and that's happening in the next few months, well, 3 to 6 months hopefully. We need to look at some collaboration risks, and the collaboration manager is developing their local risk register, and that's going to then look at what needs to escalate up. So now we've got a culture strategy, it will be important for us to look at those key strategic objectives and what are going to be the risks of those not being achieved, but reporting in a slightly different way to where other things are being reported and adding to that and adding that assurance level. So yeah, it's on the agenda for sure. So thank you. Can I just come back to your point about, or did you want to talk about the training? Yeah. So we are going to stick to be giving member briefing training on risk management on at least once a year basis, and we're now booked in. Hopefully, I spoke to Emma only a couple of days ago to make sure that I'm doing a session in January. It might well be, we need to look at what that would involve, but it might well be that it'd be useful for me to create a recording of the basics so that then at that session we can look at other things as well. But at least once a year you will receive risk management training.
Thank you, Lorna. And the point is that's optional. I'm very dedicated around risk registers and how they're implemented, but I think it is a topic that probably can develop as time goes on. But I think, as Shazia has just pointed out, it should be optional for elected members whether they do that or not. But I'll flag up that I very much want to do it. So thank you very much. So we've got 1 or 2 risks that have gone into potential exempt session. So could we at this stage then just pick up the public session, because we then have to turn off the video. The next meeting is Friday the 5th of December. And that's going to be at City Hall, Bristol. So can I thank everybody for their input today? I think it's been positive. I'd be very happy from our external and our internal auditors if they've got any feedback to me as the new chair of this body. I would welcome any comments being made. And thank you very much for your attendance today. And for everybody else, it's been a really good meeting, and it was great to see such contributions from everybody, even if I did shout at poor old Tim over there. So thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to end the meeting at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kieran, seconded it. Does that mean everybody can stay in the room?
No. Sorry. So any officers, particularly that don't need to be here for this item, if you